another live stream. We are going to be breaking down some videos, playing some video games, having a grand old time. Okay, this is VRAKS Chapter 1 from VRAKS. All right, let's see. We're just going to break this down. This is 5 minutes, and we're going to do a very detailed breakdown. All right. For those of you that don't know, in Warhammer 40k, VRAKS is the home of the Death Corps of Krieg, a destroyed post-apocalyptic world where the Kriegsmen are basically just clones that fight, die, and are filled their brains with propaganda that dying for the Emperor is the greatest honor there is. And there you go. It's explaining this for us. The Emperor's service. R.I.P. to the Emperor. Oh, you're right. Oh my gosh. Of course. I'm thinking of Krieg. VRAKS was the Death Corps' biggest battle against cultists. Oh my god. Yeah. Yeah. I am not joking. Arch Warhammer has a 40-part series on the Siege of VRAKS. Like World War I, the commanders of VRAKS for the Imperium were notoriously sycophantic fools who were totally unqualified. The Imperium double Aquila? Bow, 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 bow. Yeah, it's a long history of using religion to sort of moralize in wars, and it's certainly a oh, excuse me, gents. It's certainly true that so in Europe, right, in the Middle Ages and early Renaissance, there were proper religious wars, as there are now in the Middle East between religious sects. But then you also have a lot of modern times where religion is used to propagandize and support a war, even though there are extremely, it's the word I want, extremely like corporeal objectives, right? The you know, annexing your neighbor's territory, destroying a rising power in your sphere of influence, right? Very, very realpolitik reasons, but they end up co-opting religion to justify it. A great example is the Spanish Civil War, in which the Catholic Church supported the dictator, Franco, in his rebellion against the legitimate government of Spain, who, despite a fair amount of like pretty inhumane crimes, the church decided that because the other side was the side that the communists were fighting on, that the church would have to back their side. Not the dictator, Franco. But it wasn't clear that that was that the other side, right, the Republicans of Spain, they weren't communists. It's just that the Communist Party wasn't going to support a military dictatorship. Yeah, I mean, I think Ratskal points out that, yeah, nowadays people are starting, I think, to wake up to the fact that, like, religious leaders don't really have a ton of moral authority, that they behave more or less like other leaders, which is to say, when they get power, more often than not, they will use that power to exploit others. And in the case of religion, it's extra sort of distasteful, because like I almost expect a politician to be kind of a piece of shit, because like you have to become a politician, but a religious leader pretends to have moral authority, right? That's why, you know, you have a lot of religious leaders who support questionable policies, right? The armory. I wonder if the Death Corps actually does pray in chapels like that. I mean, they're very devoted to the Emperor, but I wonder if they would do that. here's what's always interesting to me. You're the Death Korps, right? You're the Death Korps Krieg. And so your goal is to produce a fanatically devoted soldier. What you would have to do, but here's the problem. Normal human beings, right? They follow like a bell curve, right? And more or less, you can convince human beings from similar circumstances to do similar things in similar positions, i.e., World War I, Britain could go in, draft all of its 18 to 24-year-olds, give them all a standard set of training, and in the vast majority of cases, they could be given that rifle, sent to the front lines, told to charge the Germans, and by and large, they would do it. Couple would probably have a little too much enthusiasm, right? But most people would behave in basically predictable ways. The problem is that the Death Korps, canonically, never has a rebellion, right? They never have a coward, right? Every one of them, to the man, is fanatically devoted. And so the only way to create that, right, is to have someone, it's a little like Hideo Kojima talked about in the Metal Gear Solid franchise, right? What makes a person behave the way they do? What makes a person who they are? Scene, right? Some people rise and behave in ways, in predictable ways, when presented with the right circumstances, right? That was the theme of the first game, right? Where Solid Snake, forced into an extreme situation, kept finding ways to succeed despite the odds against him. Then you have, right, scene. You have genes, right? That was Metal Gear Solid 2, that there's genetic predispositions that people have. He gets it right? I mean, obviously it's Kojima. He's kind of weird, but he establishes a core truth. And like, yes, genetic predispositions, 100% towards what do they call it? Temperaments, predilections, abilities. It's very, very genetic. There's a strong genetic component to a lot of it. But then you have what is sometimes called epigenetics, right? And this is the interplay between the environment and your genes. So some people will have certain genes activated by changes to their environment that otherwise wouldn't be activated. I'm trying to think of a really good example. Some people could live in a smoggy, could live next to a factory and never develop lung cancer. They could live next to a toxic factory. They just don't have the epigenetics for it. But some people, they live next to a factory putting out toxic smoke and they will develop vicious lung cancers. And it's like, okay, is it genetics or environment? Well, it's both, right? And those genes for lung cancer are activated by the toxins in the environment. So the point is that if you have the exact same person, literally the same genetics, and you raise them from birth to be in exactly identical circumstances, then you can be sure that you produce a soldier that will respond to circumstances in exactly the same way. So if your goal was consistency, that's how you would have to do it. You could never have a society that changes or advances or moves forward. You would be frozen in time and space because you could never take the risk that a change in the environment would change either the epigenetics or the literal mindset of the soldier that you're trying to create. Yeah, Jacob Fawn, if you guys haven't looked at some of the research and data behind epigenetics, it's really interesting. It has to looking at the body, epigenetics in response to stress and all these other things. It's really, really fascinating. Nice thing about Death Korps Krieg, probably a little easier to animate just because they're all the same model. But this dude's lighting is sick. Yeah, people sometimes don't understand the scale of what warfare, I mean, is certainly, but also could be, right? Like, we haven't really seen like a modern industrial country fully militarized for war, and it's sort of scary to think about it. Krieg is actually probably a good example of what it may look like. Yeah. So, I mean, doing the math, let's say these guys look like they're probably 30 by 30, right? And yeah, because these are transports. Yeah, these are 30 by 30, maybe 100 by 100. So let's say if it was 3 by 3, so you're talking about 900, right? So each one of these is 1,000, we'll say. So you're talking about, ooh, this is probably 10,000. So 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So you're looking at, ooh, out here, this probably represents like a third of the current. No, sorry. There's like a tenth, maybe? A tenth of the U.S. military alone, the U.S. military's combat power today, right? And we are not exactly at a wartime posture. Exactly. Tiny fractions of the combat power of the, one of the world wars. And that was when the country was, a third of a size that it currently is. Oh, wait, we can get an exact count. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. Okay, so yeah, I'm just about right. These are like 1,000 man units. Okay, the person directing traffic, that's actually a really essential role. I think in the real world they would have some sort of label here, though it's possible, right? Sometimes for operational security purposes, they actually won't put identifying markers on ships and aircraft, or sometimes they will deliberately change these ship and aircraft markers just to confuse the enemy, to make it harder for their intelligence to gather insight into where different units are. For example, it could be valuable to know if you wipe out an entire regiment of, the 31st Division, then you'll say, the 31st Division, they are down a regiment. So if we see 31st Division soldiers elsewhere, we will know that they don't have as deep a combat power, right? So that's why you might want to remove unit identifiers and keep things faceless and unidentifiable. So this is also what's interesting is the officer corps, right? And I know in lore, Krieg officers are basically just those that survive and by virtue of surviving, gather the necessary experience to become an officer. And so maybe it's just everyone has the latent ability to become an officer. If you happen to be the one that survives, we already know you have the capacity to rise through the ranks up to, a general officer level. Oh, Krieg. Yeah, so that is probably the end there. That's probably closer to the scale of, well, even that's probably closer to the scale of just the U.S. military alone, right? 3 million troops. Right? Though, unlike the military, Krieg, everyone is kind of military, whereas the U.S. military relies heavily on like civilian contractors doing military jobs, fixing aircraft, planning operations, etc. Oh man, looking good. Yeah. And as always, warping in to the battle. Oh no, a fan project. Games Workshop has their number. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. It's people very much I mean, hopefully now people are starting to wake up to the fact that a logistical failure cannot compensate for mass of troops or even necessarily a cadre of high skill troops, right? You need to make modern warfare work, everything has to function. Your training, your effectiveness, your logistics, your technology, and they all have to be on point to be successful, right? Or at least good enough. And that's one of the things that I think is pretty tough. That we're seeing in Russia. I think other countries, I think more countries are looking at Russia and saying, wow, where are our deficiencies? Instead of looking at Russia and going, wow, they aren't as good as they thought. The question they might want to ask myself, the question that they probably ask themselves is, would we get Russia'd with our military? Are we overblown? Do we have too many gee whiz tanks and helicopters and high tech stuff, and not enough of the basic skill set of logistics? Logistics, basic maneuver, individual soldier skills, low level NCO type command.
So I said, no, it was supposed to be my pentakill. Why did you do that to me?